We bought the most unhinged car of the 1990s. Here's a little taster as to why it's so crazy.
No outside door handles at all.
Can I interest you in some third-degree burns?
165 mile an hour top speed? How about no airbags?
That's right, we bought a first-generation Dodge Viper, and we're gonna show you just how ridiculous this car really is.
On my count, 3, 2, 1, activate.
We can't talk about the Viper without talking about the engine, and just like a public bus system, the engine is accessible to anybody who walks down the street. There's no way to lock the hood on a Viper. There's actually no hood catch whatsoever inside. Instead, you reach under one of the crosshairs, and then you feel around for a lever, pull that down, and then the hood pops up. But you're still not done because there's a secondary catch located under here. Pull that, and then the hood doesn't open, and that's because to fully open the hood you have to come around to the front and lift it up like this. However, Case, I might need your help on this one, because if you do it with just one person you will likely crack the hood, which at the time was the most expensive single part in any automotive American product. So people would crack these as this one has happened, and then they were thousands of dollars to replace. Okay, so you want to grab that side? Whoop. Nice.
Already, an 8-liter V10 is a pretty crazy engine, but it's got an even wilder story because at this time, in the late 80s and the early 90s, Chrysler actually owned Lamborghini, and they had a V10 kicking around. They had a cast iron truck motor that they brought to Lamborghini so that Lambo could help them turn their truck engine into an aluminum sports car engine of sorts. And I say of sorts because this is still cam and block, it's still 2 valves per cylinder. Pretty simple, but 400 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque, which made this one of the most powerful cars you could buy at the time.
Now, as Case mentioned, this engine is related to other Dodge engines at the time, such as a 5.9-liter V8 Magnum. But as Case mentioned, they did go to Lamborghini to help them with the aluminum castings. The crazy part about this engine is apparently, from the reading I've done, the Viper team had originally wanted this to be an overhead cam engine, but due to budget and time restraints, it's an old school 2 valve per cylinder cam in block. But the most beautiful part of this engine is the intake. You got those 2 runners down to the front of the car, and it just looks so cool. Plus, with this massive clamshell hood, accessibility is actually pretty good overall. So it's also really easy to break this massive hood closing it, so it's best to have 2 people help you, so you get it down kind of on these little catches, and then your instinct is to come over right to the leading edge and then force it down. But from what I've been told, you actually want to do it closer to where the hinges are located, kind of more toward the middle of the hood, and then you get it into position and push it on down. Very cool.
Another interesting part of the powertrain in this car is the exhaust system. These early first-generation Vipers had side pipes, famously, which a lot of people burn themselves on. You might be wondering how, because the tip is right there and it's pretty easy to avoid that. But this entire cover is metal, and if you get too close to that, it is gonna singe you, which is not too nice. Another oddity in this exhaust is that there's no X-pipe, and that's what gives this car its signature sound, which isn't everyone's cup of tea.
This headlight design, one of the most iconic elements on a first-gen Viper, is not even a Dodge design at all. This headlight was designed by GE for BMW for use in the BMW Z1, and they were really advanced projector beam headlights. And then ultimately BMW went with a more squared off design, so Dodge bought the rights to this headlight, and then from what I've read, they had to design the whole front end around the headlight because this was already a finalized product. Now, the most interesting part of this headlight is actually that little bit protruding out of the middle there. This is probably one of the only cars to genuinely have blinker fluid. What I mean by that, this was a level installed to get the headlights right at the factory. And according to reports, it would have cost more money to remove that little level from the manufacturing process, so they decided just to leave it in. So Vipers do genuinely have blinker fluid. The story gets even wilder with these headlights, and this information comes from a video with the chief engineer, but apparently, this is wild, because the development was already done, Dodge got this headlight design for free from GE. I'm sure there was more behind that story, but that helped save on development costs.
Now, initially, the Viper was not designed with the intent of giving it a roof, and because of that, the engineers and designers decided that it didn't really need exterior door handles. Now, that can be a little cumbersome, so the key, with a double press on the unlock button, allows you to pop open the door without touching it at all. But of course, you can also reach in and grab the door handle yourself.
Currently sitting here getting my thighs nice and toasty. Genuinely, the heat that comes off the sill is unreal. But let's keep talking about these doors because the weirdness continues. First of all, the seat belt is mounted to the door itself, which, you know, is not typically a problem, except in one instance. If you go to open the door for whatever reason, let's say you're checking out your parking job, you want to see how close you got to a curb or something, you go to open the door, it'll kind of cinch you a little bit, especially if you open it too fast. But the weirdest part about the doors is the window situation. So this was an expensive car back in the 1990s, and it didn't have power windows. But it also didn't have roll-up windows. In fact, it has no windows whatsoever built into the door. I kid you not. Now, Vipers could be had with little plastic windows that would slide into these slots up here on the door, and then you could take them out. You could also get a glass window accessory that would pop in and out. But there is no window winding mechanism whatsoever on the door of a Viper.
There's also some interesting things about this trunk, but before we get into the trunk, we've got to unlock it using the Viper key, which is a very unique design on the key that has a smiling snake head that apparently one of the designers sketched, and that smiling snake head had the nickname Sneaky Pete. Sneaky Pete. But if we pop into the trunk, you'll notice that it doesn't stay up on its own. This is another interesting bit of, I would figure, cost cutting. There's actually a prop, like the hood on a lot of vehicles, to keep the trunk open.
You're also going to notice that we have the optional hard top stored away in the trunk right now, which takes up the entire thing. And this hard top is essentially a Lego kit. You have to build it yourself. So we'll do a separate video on the insane top situation on the Viper. So the Sneaky Pete actually went through a couple different iterations throughout Viper history, and in the later Vipers it's called Fang, but this Viper doesn't have the illuminated chimsel back here where they would actually show through the Viper emblem like the later ones, but it does have the snake print behind the Sneaky Pete, which is pretty cool. So this Viper doesn't actually have its original wheels and tires on it. This is a 94, and I do believe that these are the 18-inch wheels off of a later GTS, and this is very common to see on early Vipers because the tire size on this car is berserk, specifically the rear tire size. The original was a 335 width wrapped around a 17-inch tri-spoke wheel. Tires are very expensive and in some cases hard to get for early Vipers, so a lot of people swap them out, but I'd love to try to find a set of the original wheels so we can slap some tires on it. And then it's also, because tires are expensive, often to find old rubber on these things. So this is a pretty ancient set of Michelins that's gotta go, especially given this car's kind of dangerous reputation.
If you thought that the weirdness stopped at the interior, well, you would be wrong, because this is possibly the worst feeling and worst looking dash I've ever seen in a vehicle. And I own a second gen Ram, so that's saying something. This is the cheapest feeling, dullest looking plastic I believe that I've ever seen on a car. And to top it off, there's exposed hardware all over the place, and not even nice quality, nice looking hardware, just black wood screws basically holding the thing together. As Tommy mentioned, there is no airbag here on the steering wheel, and the steering wheel itself looks like it was pulled directly from an arcade game at your local arcade. It's about as, I don't want to call it unprofessional looking as it gets, but it doesn't look like an OEM part. This is not an aftermarket wheel though. But no airbag, no traction control, no ABS. These are all things that existed at the time, and the designers of the Viper just didn't feel like it was necessary for this car.
Now I understand, this is not supposed to be a luxury machine, this is supposed to be the quintessential American stripped-down sports car. Having said that, some of the ergonomics in a Viper are just simply berserk. So, when you get into the Viper, things seem pretty normal. You got your steering wheel right in front of you. You got a huge swathe of plastic, but you don't have to worry about that because you're ready to drive in a performance manner. And then you go to put your foot on the clutch to start it, and you realize immediately where a clutch should be is a brake. And where the brake should be is the gas pedal. And the clutch isn't even in the same zip code. So if you actually look down the center of the steering column is perfectly in line with the gas pedal, and then the clutch is in another zip code entirely. The whole pedal box is forced to the left. And this could be a deal breaker for some people. It's just kind of one of the quirks of living with a Viper.
The Viper uses a very simple looking set of gauges, what Tommy calls the Pep Boys Special. Nothing especially exotic looking about those. However, right in the center there is a pretty cool screen that shows you a bit of basic information, like when the car wants you to skip shift from first into fourth gear, and your check engine light, and a few basic items. And a few of these light switches on the dash also look like they're directly from eBay, but that's OEM.
So I'm going to turn on the wipers on this car, and I do that using the same switch that was in my 95 Wrangler. I kid you not, it's literally the same part. But the wipers do this ridiculous little dance. Do you see that? So one goes, then the other goes, and they do this Irish jig, and then they fold back up perfectly in sequence, which just looks so funny when you're not expecting it. So the climate control in a Viper also feels like it's from a Burger King child's toy, but the way it works is pretty interesting. So full manual, you've got your fan speed, your temperature control, and your position, but the position switch is a little odd. So for AC, you turn it to the left. For heat, you turn it to the right. But let's say you want heat out of the face vents. Well, screw you, go buy a Corvette. There's no way you can do that, which is just hilarious. The rear window in a Viper does come out, and once again, it's like an 8th grade science fair project. So you pull down on these two pins, and then it's held in with buttons. Genuinely, like you'd find on a coat. You just pop the buttons, and then that's how you pull the window out. The amount of stuff that feels like it was created from a Michael's craft store in here, freaking crazy.
Jeremy Clarkson also famously laughed at the fact that the support bar behind the seats is not a roll bar, and it tells you to drive carefully.
So I think the Dodge guys just forgot to design the thinner console. That happens. You know, it's a pretty common situation, but there's no cup holders in this car at all. You do have a massive parking brake, and then much like a Hummer, you're about 7 feet from the person next to you, but apparently the reason you don't have cup holders, according to the reports from the era, is one of the major magazines awarded Chrysler an award for the best cup holder. And the head of Chrysler at the time, a guy named Bob Lutz, a little offended by that trivial award, so he decided to take cup holders out of the Viper. That was a bad call for America. It was a bad call.
Now, Tommy, I do have to have my camera equipment here on my lap, because in this car, you can either bring a hardtop with you or have a trunk.
Listen, you want to drive and have a bag, go buy a Corvette.
Exactly.
Okay, man, I don't know what your problem is, all right?
You want cup holders?
Go buy a Corvette. Ridiculous.
You want an automatic transmission?
Screw you, go buy a Corvette.
Or just don't get a muscle car, maybe.
Dude, you want windows? Go buy a Corvette. So it sounds like throughout this video we're making fun of the Viper, but really all of these insanities just add to the insane charm.
It's part of what makes this car so interesting. Genuinely, I would not be nearly as excited about this vehicle if it wasn't as flawed as it is.
What makes this car so special is that this car simply should not be allowed to exist.
Yeah.
Now the story behind this car is really crazy. Back in the day, the head of product at Chrysler was a guy named Bob Lutz, who owned a Cobra, and he loved his Cobra. So he went to his head of design, Tom Gale, and said, can we do a modern era Cobra? And Tom said, yeah. So then they went to the head of the company, Lee Iacocca, and said, can we do this? And Lee Iacocca said, yes, it just can't look like a Cobra. And it definitely doesn't look like a Cobra.
No, but you can see where their heads were at, because this car is very stripped down. It's very simplified, like a Cobra would be. It's got a lot of curves to it, like a Cobra has. So I get it. I can understand where the idea came from.
And the thing about this car is they developed it in record time. It took just a few years from concept into production, which for the car industry is unheard of. And I also assume they did it in record budget because I've never genuinely in my entire life, and we've been very fortunate to drive some really interesting cars, I don't think I have ever driven a production car that feels more homemade than a first-gen Viper.
That's true. It does feel very DIY, but part of the fun in that is that this car is like one of your favorite rock stars from back in the day, where you've heard all these insane things about it, and then you meet the car and all the stories are true.
Yes.
It's not blown out of proportion. This car is genuinely nuts.
It's unhinged. I'm going to steal someone else's catchphrase. I'm going to apply it to a different car. An SR1 Viper, a first generation Viper, is just a V10 shipping crate. So this is a way to turn V10 into forward movement and nothing else.
Yeah, they pretty much don't give you any other features. That V10 is the only feature of the car.
And let's talk about that V10. So 0 to 60 back in the day, according to sources, around 4.5 seconds. What does it feel like in 2025 when every car now has 400 horsepower?
It still feels genuinely dangerous.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to a stop. Now this car we bought, it's actually in really nice shape. It's only got 16,900 miles on it. But I do want to roll into it because we got to experience this engine. So are you ready?
Oh yeah, let's do it. Oh, is that rolling into it?
Wheel spin. Into seconds.
Now look, I know not everybody loves the noise that this car makes, but I do. It sounds entirely unique. The experience of being in this car is so different from any other vehicle. And at this point, for both of us, that's what we look for in a vehicle. That's why we love the Model T so much. It's why you love the Citroen 2CV or the BMW Isetta that we did last week. It's because these vehicles don't feel like other cars, and as many cars as we get to drive, that's what we're looking for.
This car is like dating a Coke addict. It is incredibly fun until you die.
Are you speaking from experience?
Maybe a little bit, Case, but genuinely, like you said, this is one of the biggest experiences I have ever lived with. Usually to experience anything like this, you're going to someone's crazy modified car.
Yeah.
Right? The somewhat of imprecision combined with the unhinged rawness of it is unlike any other car I think maybe ever made from the factory.
It is. This is a unique exercise in ridiculousness, something that not a lot of manufacturers have ever done, and when they do, it's not very often.
And it is genuinely, by modern standards, it's not EV fast, but
No.
this is plenty fast to put a smile on your face, and also plenty fast to get you in a hell of a lot of trouble really quickly.
Yeah, it's about as fast as you want it to be, especially given the reputation for this car, because it's not known to be an incredibly easy car to control.
And the interesting thing is, like, these cars, genuinely, we make fun of the quality and the design and the lack of anything in here, but they put a lot of work into the handling. And this is a really, really nicely driving car that will hug the corners and blow your socks off until it doesn't. And
Yeah.
the thing about Vipers, because they have so much tire on them, especially this one because it's got so much old tire on it, is when they let go, they're very hard to catch.
Yeah, so especially until we get some fresh rubber, we're going to take it fairly easy.
I think one of the things, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, is a lot of people don't like the way these things sound. And a lot of people say they kind of sound like FedEx trucks because all of the sound from the driver's side, or I should say most of it's coming through your left ear. And
Right.
you're only hearing every other power pulse, essentially, because you're only hearing one bank of cylinders. So you get kind of this odd fire sound that never really boils to a wail. So like a Lamborghini V10,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
They cross pipe, they have a much higher RPM, you get this zzz, zzz. This is just more like a Harley. But the cool thing about it is because you got pipes on either side of the car, it's almost like listening to a car in surround sound. Like you
Sure,
hear
yeah.
it in both ears, but not from the back, right?
Yeah.
And then whether or not you like the sound, it's a lot of it. So it may not be a good sound, but at least it's a lot of sound.
I'm not sure that I definitely wouldn't call this the best sounding car of all time, but I would challenge any car enthusiast to get behind the wheel of this and not have a huge smile on your face. Not only because of the car itself, and certainly not just because of the acceleration, because like you said, there's plenty of modern day cars and EVs that accelerate quicker. It's largely because of the sound this makes. It's a hell of an experience. I would wager a nearly objectively good experience as far as excitement is concerned.
So this car, brand new, in 94, was about $55,000, okay? A Corvette back in 94 probably started somewhere around $37,000. Now, you've actually owned a Corvette of this generation. How would you compare the driving experience between the Viper and a C4 Gen Corvette?
It's interesting. Yeah, there's definitely some areas where it doesn't feel as refined, and maybe it's because I spent more time in the Corvette, but I would be more comfortable, even when this is on fresh rubber, I would be more comfortable cornering the Corvette more aggressively.
Yeah.
Because it just feels a bit more sorted out. But the experience, when I first got behind the wheel of this car, it took everything within me to drive it back to the office and park it up. Because this is such a spectacular car to drive. And a bucket list item, the first I got behind the wheel of it, over the moon.
Dude, this is like a Miata with a meth problem.
Yeah.
Is the best way to describe it, and I don't think it is comparable to a Corvette. It was also a sales flop in comparison to a Corvette. I mean, they only built about 6,000 of the first generation Viper, and the biggest problem is the bean counters wanted to make this a car that, I don't know, people would want to buy. So they wanted to make it a more affordable version with the V6, they wanted to do a V8, they really wanted to do an automatic, and they just did it. Demonstrated. Positively everybody wants to race you.
Yeah,
like
that's
you
true.
can drive a 90s Corvette and people will give you the thumbs up and it's a cool car. This thing makes people go mental.
And it's such a poster car. That's why at the end of the day, and that's how it was designed and how it was positioned, what it was intended to do,
right,
was look good in a photograph, and it absolutely does that. It's got the attitude, the sound, the image.
And the other thing too about these is, I mean, this is a 30-year-old Chrysler product.
Yeah.
And for being a 30-year-old Chrysler product, there's two things to know. A, they're pretty reliable because they're pretty basic.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of crap to break in these things. And B, they're shockingly expensive. So a 94 Corvette ZR1, a really good one will be probably $30, $35, right?
Yeah.
This thing we paid $40,000 for this car, and you can get a bad one is maybe 30, and a really good one's maybe 45. So they never really got that cheap. And I also think this is a really safe investment because it's in an era when people are kind of gravitating back to manual transmissions and back to naturally aspirated engines. This is kind of the pinnacle of manual transmissions and naturally aspirated engines, you know what I mean?
In a way.
Yeah, really cool.
All things considered, most people would agree that the Viper is an objectively terrible car. But that, among many other reasons, is exactly why we love it so much, enough to have gone out and spent our own money to buy one so that we can make videos with it. And there are going to be a ton of videos coming up, including, and hopefully very soon, a drag race with this Viper put head-to-head against its main rival, the C4 Corvette ZR1. So stay tuned, let us know what you think in the comments below. That's all for this video, and we'll see you next time.